Gosh, I'll remember the guy that in Teton Park. And I was tired because I just came that evening off of a climb off of the Grand Teton. And this woman was there and was frantic because her son and her husband had left to go on a hike and said that they would be back for supper, and it was dark and they weren't back. And the rangers were saying to her, well, let's wait a while and wait till tomorrow morning. If they have to stay out tonight, it's not too awfully cold. If they have to stay out, we'll go looking for them in the morning. But that wasn't satisfactory for her. She was very, very nervous and crying and was trying to call her senator in Washington. And so the park superintendent come up and asked me if I'd go out, and I said sure, because the rangers couldn't do it, you see. In those days we had cowboy rangers, and they weren't going no place they couldn't ride a horse. It was a long time before we got rangers that had mountaineering thing, because they were like the other cowboys. By God, I ain't lost nothing up there, those damn fools. What do they want to climb mountains for? So I got a couple of my guides, and we found out they'd went across the lake and over there around this part. So we went out and went up through there, spread out and yoo-hooed all night, and came back, and what did we find out? This person, who was a professor at Harvard, won't mention his name, came back in the night, rather late, and saw what was happening, and the rangers had disappeared. So what did he do? He picked up his tent in the middle of the night and, like the Arab, fled. So next morning when we come down, he was already racing across Wyoming back towards Harvard. So you see how some people act when well, the big rescue that I was on wasn't so funny. It wasn't so funny. As a matter of fact, if I was hired as a professional, I wouldn't have done it for $100,000. But some people think I got more. I stopped the other day and met an old-timer in Jackson and had a drink with him, and he said, "Petzoldt, you're an old man now." He said, "Tell me the truth and I won't tell anybody." Of course, that was a lie. He said, "Tell me the truth and I won't tell anybody. How much money did you get from that plane?" Well, I don't know if any of you have ever seen that old movie called A Mountain, I believe, with Spencer Tracy, where he was a guide in Switzerland. It was a great movie in its day. And this plane had lit up on top of the mountain, and he had to climb up there with it to see if there's any people alive. And he took his sort of wayward nephew with him, and they climbed up there, and the nephew fell, and Spencer Tracy, belaying him, caught him, and the rope was running through his hands, and you could see the blood coming out of his head to the hands while he gripped the rope and held it. A lot of stuff like that. A very interesting movie. Didn't have a good mountaineering advisor, but it was thrilling. A lot of space. And when they got to the plane, they found that there was a girl alive. And so they had made a sort of a stretcher-like thing, and they were going to drag her through the snow. And this guy, looking around, found this satchel that was full of money. And he secreted that in his pack and didn't tell didn't tell his uncle, I guess it was, about it. And they were going and going, bringing this girl down over the glacier. And of course, justice had to be done. So this fellow, when they got the girl across, he stepped on a snow bridge to get across it. That was the end of him and the money too. But that was fresh in people's minds. Well, there was a stormy day in Jackson Hole, and the local people had heard a plane. And they didn't have an airport in Jackson Hole, so they heard a plane. In the afternoon, I think somebody even maybe thought they saw it, but it was a cloudy day, and the clouds were lower than the mountains. And that night, a fellow by the name of Pete Peterson was driving from Moran down to Jackson, and the clouds parted up there, and he had his kid in the pickup with him. He said, "Dad, what's that light up there?" And he looked up there through the clouds, and he saw a big light right near the top of Mount Moran, which is a big mountain in the Tetons. And then the clouds turned in, and the guy said it wasn't a hallucination. He knew he saw a light up there. It looked almost like a fire. So when he got into Jackson, he reported it, and the sheriff called up aviation people in Salt Lake, and he told them about this. And they said, "Oh, we're glad to hear this. This plane is supposed to land at Bismarck, Dakota, or North Dakota, wherever it is. And they're overdue, way overdue. And we have had no word for them." And so everybody concluded that the plane was up near the top of Mount Moran. And the next day, the planes were flying over there, and the Navy sent some parachuters to jump out. Luckily, they didn't. We'd been looking for them yet if they had. And they sent in an Army climbing team, and the sergeant looked at the situation and said, "We're not prepared to do that." And here again I was called. And I took a look at the mountain, and here on the side that where you saw the light, the mountain is outward sloping slabs. They go like this, and then they drop off like shingles on a roof. And they were covered, piled up with snow, and there's avalanches running all over. I wasn't going to get on one of those slabs, not even for 100,000. But we had to start out. I mean, when they heard about the plane up there, a lot of the skiers from Jackson Hole just got on their skis and started 6 miles through the timber towards the base of Mount Moran. And they were lucky to get back that night without hypothermia. But that's the way people do, you know. They just get excited and do crazy things if there's a rescue. So I didn't want to do it. And I went down and went in the cowboy bar, and I sat at one end thinking it over, and I thought I'd better have a Jack Daniels while I was thinking. And I heard these cowboys at the other end saying, "Well, they got the right SB now. If he can't get up there, nobody can. So what are you going to do?" And the sheriff had called me up, asked me to come over. He said, "I told these people in Jackson Hole that when they elected me sheriff, my authority ended at Timberline." And he said, "They're hounding me. The phone is ringing off the hook. Why haven't I got a posse and gone up there? And this fellow in Colorado at Aspen is causing me a lot of trouble and bad publicity to Denver Post, because he doesn't know why I won't let him bring his dog team up here and mush up there and rescue those people." But then people were calling up all over, relatives. There was 28 people missing. So we went up to Timberline. We got some of the local climbers and skiers to help us pack the stuff, and we had another ranger then who was really an expert climber. So this ranger and I were in charge of the thing, and we went up to Timberline, but still the clouds were there, and we didn't know where the plane was. But before I left, I'd taken a picture of the front of the mountain and drawn it into squares and numbered those squares, I think, from 1 to 50 or something like this. So when they saw it, if the clouds broke, all the aviator do was have that picture in front of him and mark that square, and then they could radio the number of that square. I had the picture too, so we could know where the plane was at. So we went up there and stayed all night, and the next morning the clouds parted, and we found somebody saw the plane, and before the clouds come in again, and so we knew where it was. And that meant we had to go up over those slabs. So others supported us, and Ranger and I set it up, and the way we had to do it, we'd have to drive in a piton, and since he was lighter than me, he had to take most of the chances. I'd put him on the end of the rope through a couple of carabiners and hold him, and he'd go up there and with a stick or reach out or get out there and jump on this slab and avalanche it off, and I'd catch him with the rope. So we did this quite a while, but it was slow work, and that they had to snow in, and it started to snow. You couldn't see, and our glasses froze up and our eyebrows froze up, so we had to retreat that night. And of course we had radio contact, so we had support there. They brought us up some sleeping bags, and we slept there in the snow, and the next morning we started up there again. And then when we got up next to the plane, there was a big slab. But before we got to the plane, they'd cleared up some, and dozens of crows were there. But we had to walk that last slab. I don't know whether you've ever been in how things act. Generally before an avalanche, you'll hear it. It'll go, and that's when the snow will settle a little bit, and then off she goes. So we were listening for that, and it didn't happen, so we got up there alive. And the fuchsia, the back of the plane is still there, intact, just an aluminum shell. There's not, it's still there. Not anything in it, not even a wire. All the seats, all the wiring, all the insulation, everything went out the front of the plane because it had hit a solid rock wall or a big rock. And the people had gone through the front with all the propellers or whatever there was and hit the wall and bounced off. And the largest piece we found was the torso from here to here. Of course, some of the rest of them, I'm sure, had gone avalanche down onto the glacier below. But so we came back and re-reported it, and it was the people were from a New Tribes mission from Chico, California. They were missionaries that trained people that only went to new tribes, which to them meant where they had no missionaries before. And they were going to Dakota to pick up some more, and they were going down to South America to the Rio Negro, which in that day, and a lot of people never came out alive when they went in there anyway. But so we recommended that they not try to bring back the bodies or the pieces of the bodies, because we didn't have the people. Today we would, but we didn't have the people in those days who could do that type of winter climbing safely. And so they did. But the next spring, or the next summer, Glenn Exum, one of the first guides that I trained and who I'd taken in as a partner then, and I took up a group of people up to the plane. We had 2 doctors from the state of Wyoming who could sign the death warrants or death deed things, so estates could be settled, you see, and insurance could be collected and all that, because they had to have some sort of proof that this person was dead. So, and then they had a couple of people from the mission, and then they had a couple of people from the aeronautic survey, you know, to look at the plane or the wreckage and say what happened. So this was quite a group. And when I was up there, I saw these little, looked like oyster shells on the rocks. And I called over one of the doctors, and he said, "Oh, my guy," he said, "they hit pretty hard, didn't they? Because these were pieces of skulls." And then where the plane hit, there was a sort of a snow seam in this big rock or cliff there. And Glenn Exum saw a shoe in there, and he took a hold of it. And it was pretty solid. And we started to dig out, and here we got the pilot, who'd gone through the front end and hadn't hit the rock, but had gone into this snow that was jammed in this crack. And so we dug him out, and he was all there. His head was a little soft, but he was pretty well preserved. He'd been in the snow all winter. So we buried him on the site. We put some rocks over his body and left him there. And so we came down, and the park put it off climbing limits for a while. You can go up there now and see the old plane. And that was it. I went by there last summer and stopped up at Moran, one of those drive-outs they have there in the park. You can take classes and you can see this. I stood there, and some guy was looking at the classes who had read about it. He was telling everybody about how the people went up there and everything. So I heard my own story from a stranger. But, well, this fellow had his pocketbook, and he's still in his trousers, and there was some money in it, and other things that they took back. But then the rumor got out that these people had a lot of money to take down to South America with them, and I guess they did have a lot of traveler's checks. And the rumor got out that here was a reaction of Spencer Tracy, and I'd gotten all that money, and I'd recently bought a piece of land over by Riverton. And here, 40 or 50 years later, this guy at the bar said, "Petzoldt, tell me the truth. How much money did you get from that plane?" "How much do you think I got?" I wish it were true.